Hello, everyone, and welcome to session 3 of WordPress 101 at WordCamp Kent 2020. I'm Tim O'Haber. I'm a part of the organizing effort for WordCamp Kent 2020, and it's been a fantastic experience of people coming together and participating in chat and in Slack, and I want to thank you all for your participation. This is the third of 3 consecutive pre-recorded presentations for Learning WordPress. Our speaker, Joe Querin, is drawing on his deep experience from 2 decades as a web designer and a web developer to help you how to understand how to do more with WordPress. This third session is very much about understanding more. So I hope you were stretching your brain along with your body during the longer break. During this session, please be sure to add your questions to chat. Joe is going to be available again at the end of session 3 to answer questions for you. So with that, I know Joe's not done yet. Let's see the third session of WordPress 101.
Welcome back, everyone, to session 3. I hope you learned lots in session 1 and 2, and we were able to answer all your questions. If you still have some questions, we'll hopefully have some time at the end for a live Q&A to do another round of questions. But otherwise, plug them into the chat now while we're watching the video, and I'll do my best to answer your questions within the live chat, or maybe someone else that's in watching as well might be able to answer your question. That's the great thing about WordCamps, the interaction with everyone. And even if, we're trying to do this virtually, we still got that interaction. And you can hop over into Slack as well and ask your questions over there too. We'll have the happiness bar in Slack and other Slack channels you can chat in. So we're going to try and cover quite a few things in this last session. Hopefully we'll have time for everything. We're going to talk about WordPress Multisite. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't. It might be a fit for you, it might not be, but it's something I want to at least try to cover, try to demystify, so it's not such a scary thing like some people think it is. It is a little bit on the complicated side, but once you get the hang of it, it's not really that hard to use. We'll also try and look at some site backup plugins and why you should use them. The differences between child themes and custom themes. So let's see what's out there, why one might work better for you than the other. I'll try and look into some public plugin development as well. And I'll try to look at some local development stuff, tools, workflow, code repositories, things that you might have heard of but don't really understand, but maybe it would be helpful to see. And then, like I said, hopefully we'll be able to answer some questions at the end too in a live chat, live Q&A. So WordPress Multisite. WordPress Multisite actually exists within WordPress. It's not an additional plugin. It's not an additional thing. It's just something that you have to enable. And what WordPress Multisite is it allows you to create a network of sites within one WordPress install. So you have one install of WordPress. Inside of that one install, you have one theme or at least one copy of a theme. You might have multiple themes in there, but you have one copy of it. And then you have one copy of each of the plugins that you're going to use for the site. And then there's all the sub-sites, all these sites in the network can share those themes and plugins, which makes it really nice because instead of having to spin up 10 different installs with 10 copies of a theme and 10 copies of the plugins, and then you have to go back and update everything because, updates happen ever so often, it allows you to keep one install, one copy of the theme, one copy of a plugin up to date real easily for a multitude of different sites. Another way you could use WordPress Multisite is the way that I use it at the college I work for. We have a lot of different departments and organizations within our college. And so we have one install of WordPress, and we have each department, each area of the site that needs to have its own set of editors, maybe a custom theme just for that section of the site, or a specialized plugin just for that section of the site, gets to be a sub-site in our WordPress Multisite. Currently, we have about 70 WordPress sites within our multi-site installation, but it's one copy of WordPress. So when WordPress needs to be updated, I update WordPress in one place. When a plugin needs to be updated, I update the plugin in one place. When I need to make a change to a theme, I make a change to the theme in one place. Unfortunately, I have multiple themes because I have multiple sites that have different themes within the thing. So even some of my changes for my themes, I have to make in multiple themes, but it's still not as many as if I had to have 70 separate installs of WordPress. And it just really wouldn't work for our college because then everything would be just separate. And this way, everything's together in one place. So the way you enable WordPress Multisite is really simple by going into your wp-config file and you add this line. And note the line has a comment that says this is on, I'm turning on multisite, define WP allow multisite, and it equals true. I included a bit.ly link for you so you can get to the WordPress.org support section of the site to talk to you about how you can create your own WordPress network. I recommend you do that in a local development area like we talked about in session 2. That way it allows you a chance to play, allows you a chance to get used to how this works because it is a little bit different. And I'll show you how it's a little bit different in just a second here. So let's go pop over into a WordPress install and take a look at how this looks. Let's see. So this is my WordPress install. And no, I haven't installed Multisite yet. Everything's still here, still intact. So we look over at the create a network article. It talks about how a network works, what you want to know, how you need to prepare WordPress. And so step 2, here's that line where we talked about. So I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go into my code editor, which I use Visual Studio code, and I'm going to pull in my wp-config.php file, which when you open it up looks like this. So you scroll down, you get past all this stuff, and then below the where it has WP debug faults, or if your install has that, or it might be just after table prefix WP underscore or whatever your table prefix is, which in production I recommend that you change that so it's not the default. When you're installing WordPress, it'll ask you what you want to use as a table prefix. A trick I do is I use a couple of letters that is part of the organization. So I work for Lorain County Community College, so I prefix everything with LC. And then I look at the time that I'm installing. If it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, then I might add WP14 or WP13. And so by doing that, if it says 2:30, I'll do WP 1430, and that way I'm making that table prefix unique, and it's less likely a hacker is going to guess what it is and be able to inject something into my database and take over my site. So just a little security tip there. So we'll go down to define WP faults, and I'm going to throw my multi-site line in. I'm going to save, and I'm using keystrokes, so Control S for save, Control V to paste, and I'm going to go back to my browser, and if I refresh, nothing appears to have changed, but if you look under Tools now, you see there's a network setup option. So there's 2 ways that you can configure WordPress Multisite. There's the subdomain, which you can see in the example is like site1.yourdomain.extension or site2.yourdomain.extension. So if you're using this for a company, you could do products.wp-multisite, you could do support.wp-multisite, or you could do any number of things, however you want to define it. I like to use subdirectory, and that's what we use at the college. So instead of something in front of the domain, it's your domain.extension / and a subdirectory name. So in my case, it's admissions and enrollment, or financial aid, or an academic division title of some sort. So we'll go with subdirectory, and I'm going to keep the network title of WordPress Multisite Sites, my network admin email, and I'm going to click install. And so it did some stuff in the background, and now it wants me to copy all of this and paste it below where I put stuff in Visual Studio Code. Now, if you notice back here on the page, there's also some other stuff here. If you're on a Apache web server and you're using an htaccess file, and if you don't know what an htaccess file is, then most likely you don't have one, or you just haven't learned about that little gem. But if you have an htaccess file, you look at your host, look at your files of your install, and see if you have this .htaccess file in your list of files in your FTP program or your control panel, wherever you're looking at it. If you have that file, open it up and put those values in where it says to put them in. If you're not using Apache, if you're using Nginx or your host is using Nginx, you don't have to worry about that. I've never had to alter any of my installs. I run Nginx, and so it works just fine. So I put all that into Visual Studio Code. I'll hit save, Control S, come back to my browser, and I refresh. Now it's going to want me to log in again. So I log in with my username and password. Again, local development area, not super secure. Definitely do not want to use admin in production. Use anything but admin. Again, I like to try to customize it to the organization. If I was doing a site for a construction company, I might use the username of hammer or circular saw or something that denotes the customer's name even, just to make it unique, and because admin is guessed by all the hackers. So I'll click login, and we're back to our network setup page. But if you notice, my dashboard looks different. So now I have sites, and I have users, and I have themes, and I have plugins, and I have settings. If I go to sites, I don't have any sites but the main site. So you always have your main site. For us, our homepage is our main site, and then all the other subdirectories are the other departments and divisions. Your users, this is where all your users would show up, and now you have something called a super admin. A super admin is a network admin. He has the ability to add sites to the network, to remove sites from the network. The super admin also has the ability to add themes and to network enable them. If I do not network enable these other 20 themes, the 2016, 17, 19, and 15, they will not be available by the subsites to be able to pick up a theme and use it. So here's where you can enable certain themes. You can have whatever you want available to the network. Plugins. Plugins are kind of an interesting thing in WordPress Multisite. I add all my plugins here. Even if it's just going to be used on one subsite, I have to add it here at the network level. But once I add it here at the network level, I can choose to network activate it, which means I force all of the sites on the network to use that plugin, or I can give the site the option to pick the plugin and use it in the site themselves. Okay. So if I go back to sites, I'll just create a quick site just to show you how this works. And so I'm going to click, and I'm going to make one, and I'm going to call it products. I have other choices on my list because of where I work. And I'm going to call this the product department. And they're going to use the same email of admin. And I can even change the site language if I chose. So I'll click add site. So now you see I have all my sites here, and I can go to the dashboard of the site. Now it looks like the dashboard you would expect. But if you notice up in the top, it has products/wp-admin. So now I can create users here that only have access to this site. And I can choose what users have an ability to do what. So I can add a new user, and I can call them an editor. And I'll do editor at local.test, and I'm going to make him an administrator, and I'm going to skip the confirmation email, and I click add new user. So now he's available to log into the site, but he has to have a password. So I have to come down here to generate password, and I can either use what they chose, or I can set it to my very weak password that I use here locally in development. So now if I was to go into an incognito window where I'm not cached or anything, and I go to WP multisite-test and I do -WP admin, and I'm going to log in with my editor. Notice it dropped me right into products, right where I belong. And I have all my administrative functionality for this site, except for it doesn't look like I can add plugins. So that's kind of interesting. I wonder why that is. Go back to plugins. My network activate one just to see. No. Huh, that's kind of interesting. Then go down to department level. Look at editor. He has administrative rights. Well, I guess that's what you get with a theme demo. Or with a live demo. So I'll have to look in to see why he can't do anything with plugins. Oh, that's a new feature. So now I'd have the ability here to activate a plugin if I want. I activated a Kismet for this site. And it's only for this site. I can deactivate it. So I had a list of plugins here and I needed a special plugin for products. Then I could enable it here and I wouldn't have to worry about it being enabled on all of the other sites within the WordPress Multisite. So it's pretty cool what it can do. Pretty powerful. As you notice, it even has some I shouldn't say glitches, but things that I didn't even expect or didn't know. Some things that changed in the newest version. But it gives you the ability to tool around and play with things. So it might, like I said, it might be useful to you. It might not be. It just depends on what you're trying to do with WordPress. So let's continue on with our slides. Site backups. So you definitely want to have a site backup of some sort, whether it's you're doing a manual backup yourself or you use a plugin like Updraft Plus, where you can actually schedule backups. Backup WP Up is another one. Back WP Up is another one. Duplicator is nice. I like to use it for backups and site migrations. So being able to pull production down to test, or being able to push test up to production, however you want to do it. But definitely you want to use some kind of a backup because you never know when your site could get compromised or when you could make a mistake and cause your site to explode or something gets deleted. But you definitely want to use a site backup of some sort. A lot of those backup plugins also give you the capability and ability to store your backups off-site. So whether it's you connect to a Google Drive or a Dropbox account, or it FTPs it somewhere, or it emails it, or you're connected to Amazon and you're using an S3 bucket, you can actually put your backup there. A lot of options of storing your backups off-site, which I really recommend. You want to create a backup at your host, but also make sure you have a backup that's stored off-site. Even if you have it duplicated a couple times once you get it. So say you get it emailed to you once a week and you save it out of your email and you put it on a flash drive, you put it on a portable hard drive, you burn it to a DVD, just so you have backups in a variety of places, because you never know when you're going to have a system failure of some sort. I've had flash drives go bad. I've had hard drives go bad. I've had computers just spontaneously decide to stop working, and you panic because you wonder what all you're going to lose. And we're all concerned about our own family pictures and music and all that stuff. But when you're running a business off your website, you need to really worry about your website as much as you worry about the pictures of your family. Just my two thoughts, but my 2 cents. Backups, definitely. Now, child theme versus custom theme. You might have heard the nomenclature, the words, but really not understand what it is. A child theme allows you to modify elements of a theme that you need to change. So let's say you like one of the 20 themes, but you want to make some changes to it. You could create a child theme of the 2020 theme and then modify what you don't like inside the 2020 theme. It allows the parent theme to still be updated, so you can get updates from the 2020 theme, and it kind of cascades down. Only need to change the files, the styles, the elements that you need altered. So you don't have to sit there and look. You look at the 2020 theme and you say, there's 25 files here. I don't want to have to modify 25 files just to make my changes. You may not need to. You may only need to change 2 or 3 files, and that's perfectly fine. Open them in a code editor, save them into a new folder, make your changes. That's all you need. You don't have to pull in all 25 files if you don't want to. Same with styles. You might look at the style sheet and say, hey, there's 400 styles in here. I don't need to change all 400 styles. No, you don't, because with CSS and things cascade, your parent theme will come in first, then your child theme will come in second, and whatever changes to the parent styles that you make will be changed. You could even be introducing a new style that doesn't even exist, and all you have to do is add that to your header. So you take your header file, you add your class or your ID to the element, go into your style sheet, add on the class or the ID, what the properties are, save it. You've now created a child theme. So, and almost any theme can have a child theme created for it. You don't have to do anything special to the parent theme, which is really, really cool, because you could find a theme out there that you really, really like, but you just need to make a few small tweaks, and you could do that with a child theme. Now, a custom theme, on the other hand, is a completely entire theme that needs to be built. And what I recommend is a starter theme from underscores.me, or there's a new one from Morton, when I mentioned in the first session or actually the second session, from LinkedIn Learning. Morton Rand Hendrickson, he created what's called wprig.io. And what wprig.io is, it's a really nice theme. It's a starter theme that is accessible from the beginning. So if you're looking to make your website accessible, because you don't want to get hit with an accessibility lawsuit by someone, then use wprig.io as your starter theme. Otherwise, you could use underscores.me, which is basically a blank theme from Automatic, from the WordPress community, that gives you everything that you need to create a theme and gives you the basics, but there is no style whatsoever to it. So when you load it up, everything is just jumbled on the screen, and you need to start adding your own styles to it. The underscores.me theme is what I actually used at the college to create the themes that we have on the site. And so everything is built off of underscores. It's a few years ago, underscores constantly changed and made modifications, but you can go to underscores.me, type in your theme name, type in a slug for your theme, and it will generate a zip file that you can then download. WP-Rig, I think you just download the latest build from GitHub, and then you start making your modifications to it. Your other option is use a 20 theme to start from. You could actually take 2020, make a copy of it, or 2015, or whatever you want, make a copy of that theme, and then start making your changes and use that as your starter theme. The only thing with that is you do have styles that are going to be already there, but if your theme already is that's kind of where you want to go with your theme, it gives you a basis to start from. So if you're making more than a few style edits and a few template changes, and I mean a few, like say under 5, maybe under 10, then I would recommend to make a custom theme. A child theme can be just a set of style sheet changes, or also include template changes as well. So really, all you could do is create a folder in your themes directory, call it 2020 child, and then put inside there a styles.css. And that's all you need to do to make a child theme. And you could just modify styles inside the style sheet. Really neat. I want to stress this, you only need to change the template files that need to be changed. No need to change everything. I have seen some people that sit there and they take the 2020 theme, or they take some other theme and they copy it, and they copy the entire theme over, and then they start making changes. You're giving yourself a headache if you're trying to change all 25 or 30 or 40 or 50 files, however many there may be in that theme. Just change what you need to change. Okay. So let's take a quick look. I think we got time. We can take a quick look at underscores.me at least. There's underscores.me. So I can click advanced options if I want. And notice they even have a WooCommerce boilerplate now. I haven't been here in a little while. But I can say Joe's theme. and we'll just call it, we'll do it as a slug. Now, a slug is something that's all in lowercase. It could have a dash separating words, but it's how you refer to things in the background. So your posts, your pages all have a slug. I'm going to type in my name and my author URL. And I can add a description if I want. I could choose to sassify it, which actually is a kind of a compiled CSS. That's kind of neat. I can click generate. And you notice now I have a download. So I can open it. Inside there's my theme. And that's everything that I need to start working. I could open up the style.css and start working on a theme. I could do that. I can also go over to WordPress.org and say child themes. And I can go to developer documentation. Here's child themes in the developer handbook. And so here's all I would need to do, put into my CSS file. This is what makes a child theme a child theme. And right here, theme name, description, author. Here's the template. I put in the theme slug. So in this case, 2015. If it was 2020, then it would be 2020. Whatever the theme slug was, you can look at your theme that you're creating the child theme for and grab that and put that in here. And that gives you everything that you need to do to create a child theme. With the child theme, you have to have the parent theme installed as well. So I'd have to have 2020. And if it was in a multi-site network, I'd have to have 2020 enabled, network enabled, as well as my child theme network enabled. But my child theme is the one that I would actually choose in the site. So when I go here and I go to appearance and themes, it would be the theme that I would have active. I would not activate the parent theme. I would activate the child theme. And like I said, you can pull in elements from the parent theme, and then you can also pull in your new elements from the child theme and have it modified and changed. So really cool. Gives you some different options when you're doing themes. Now, in terms of plugin development, there's a WordPress plugin boilerplate that I recommend, wppb.me. There's also the theme-specific plugin from WP Beginner, which that's a really cool kind of guide. Let's see. No, I keep clicking the wrong thing. So our plugin development theme-specific plugin, let's take a look at that. So I go to wpbeginner.com, theme specific plugin. And here's the what, why, and how's to creating a theme specific plugin or a site specific plugin. What the nice thing with the site specific plugin is this is all the code that you need to add into to create a plugin. So let's go do that. Say copy, and I'm going to go down to my. This is my multi-site. So in WP Content Plugins, I'm going to create a folder, and I'm going to call it Joe's Plugin. Inside, I'm going to create a file. So I'm going to go File, New File, and I'm going to say Save As. And I'm going to save this as a say Joe's plugin.php, paste in my site specific stuff. So this is site plugin for Joe's site. So now I save it, and if I come back to plugins, you notice I just put it right in the plugin directory, and here it's available. Okay, so I could go down to my product department site, and I could go to plugins, and I could activate that plugin right there. So back when we mentioned custom post type, custom fields, I could put that code right in here to create a custom post type. Okay. So again, this is why I really recommend a local development server. And why? Well, because WordPress needs PHP and MySQL to support the site. PHP renders HTML out to the browser. It also gets compiled on the fly, and it's done on the server, and it sends HTML down to the browser to create the site. It could also be sending down JavaScript, CSS, whatever the PHP is generating. But PHP needs to run in a server environment to compile. It can't run locally just within the browser. See, the web server serves the theme files, it serves WordPress core, serves the plugin files. And so, again, I really recommend if you want to use WAMP, if you're a little more basic, desktop server, local by Flywheel, or you could go a little more advanced. I use Vagrant or VVV, and actually this is what the WordPress VIP agencies use. You could even use Docker. A lot of people are starting to use that now, or you can use containers to hold everything, or a hosted development server by your host. Again, with local development, I really recommend source code repositories. I use GitHub with GitHub Desktop Client. It makes it really easy to put things in. And now GitHub changed. So now you can have unlimited private repositories as well as public repositories and have additional contributors. And then if you just want to add in additional things, then you got to buy into their services. You could also go with Bitbucket. I don't like Bitbucket's tools as well as GitHub's, but Bitbucket is available to use as well. There's also GitLab, which is kind of like GitHub, but again, it has a little different feel to it. I really like the GitHub Desktop Client. Makes it really easy. Once you have things in the source code, you need to be able to get things out of your source code repository. And so one of the things I use is WP Pusher. And it allows me to push all my changes up to GitHub, and then I can go into WordPress and actually pull those changes out of a GitHub repository and put them on my local server, which makes it really nice for deploying new themes, new plugins, changes to themes, changes to plugins. I can do that all through WP Pusher on my local sites and not really have to touch the file systems of my servers, which really makes it nice. In terms of source code editors, there's a few different that you can pick from. Adobe has one called Brackets. It's for free. Microsoft also has one called VS Code that's also free. It's the one I used earlier. There's also Atom, which GitHub developed. All three of these have extensions that are available to you, have themes that are available for source code highlighting, so it can highlight different properties, methods, actions, that type of stuff in your different languages that you're writing. It has different code tools to help you to make sure you're writing clean PHP or clean JavaScript. It has prompting libraries that you can download for each of them. So as you start typing a function name in WordPress or a function name in PHP or in JavaScript, it will start suggesting things to you using IntelliSense. Makes it really nice. All of these two also have extensions that you can use to connect to your GitHub or your source code repositories. Do all the push and pull changes, merge changes, make new branches, whatever you need to do. And then there's also, like I said, themes that can highlight and color and add some color to your local development. I tend to run dark mode most times because it's easier on my eyes, but it's up to you however you want to configure your editors. I also recommend looking at a JavaScript task runner. And years ago when I heard about them first, it was there was Gulp, and there was another one on the market, and I can't remember what it was called now, but Gulp runs a lot faster for me, and I really like it. Inside of a Gulp file, which is basically a JavaScript object notation file, a JSON file, it looks like JavaScript, but it's a little different. You set up the tasks that you want the Gulp to do, and there's something called auto prefixer, which is really helpful with CSS. You can tell it, I want to go support so many versions back of this browser and this browser and that browser. And then as you're putting in your CSS, and then auto prefixer runs, and it sits there and says, hey, you're using this property, but in this version of Firefox, it's not supported, but this one is instead. And so it plugs that in for you and sets the properties identical to what the properties that you put in your other CSS. So instead of me having to know, all the different variants for Chrome, all the different variants for Firefox, all the different variants for IE Edge, all the different variants for all the other different browsers that are out there. I can just type what I know, and Autoprefixer does the rest for me, which makes it really nice. I also use Sass now instead of just CSS. I use compiled CSS, which Sass is really cool in the fact that I can create variables inside of CSS. So I can create a color variable, define the color code in one place, and then use the color variable throughout all my Sass files. And then if I need to change the color, I just go back, change the one color, and Gulp recompiles my Sass files into CSS and distributes the color property throughout all my files. I can also break all my CSS down. So I have a header file, I have a body file, I have a content file, I have a footer file, I have a text file, a type file, a navigation file. And that way, then when I need to make a change, I can go right to that file, look at a few lines of CSS, and not have to wade through 300-400 lines of a CSS file. The other nice thing is it goes through my JavaScript files and it does debugging, it does linting. It looks for errors and tells me if there's any errors in my JavaScript, which is really nice as well. The other thing that Gulp does with the Sass compiling is it can also minimize the files. It takes out all the white space, makes the CSS file as small as possible, so then it makes the site load faster. And it can do the same thing with JavaScript as well. Really cool. And it looks like we're out of time for this session. We do have some time now for a live Q&A. So I look forward to your questions. And please feel free to contact me at my website, joequerin.com. I'm on Twitter at joequerin. You can find me in GitHub on JoeQ, WordPress as well, wordpress.org, JoeQ. And I'll be around for the rest of the day in Slack. And in the days to come as well, we'll be part of the Slack community. So please ask your questions, put your comments in, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. Thanks for attending. Really appreciate it, and look forward to being able to see you soon at a future WordCamp.
Thank you, Joe. Joe, that was 3 sessions of awesome.
Thank you.
So you covered so much material. There's so many questions to draw from that. I want to start with a comment in chat about the learning curve that comes with a starter theme. Do you have any suggestions for how you begin to learn a starting theme, and what other technologies does someone need to know before they decide to approach learning a starter theme?
Well, with a starter theme, you want to look for something that you can understand. Sometimes depending on what libraries might be included, some might include some JavaScript libraries maybe you're not familiar with, or a responsive framework that you're not familiar with. So you really want to look for what all does the theme include initially that you can understand, and then just download it and start looking through it, see if it makes sense to you. Read through, see if it's got comments a lot. If it's a good starter theme, it's going to have a lot of comments to explain what each function and thing is. Don't expect each line of code to be commented. But generally, a lot of the good starter themes do all comment as they go down, incorporating the different WordPress functions and filter calls and theme hooks and that type of stuff to be able to tell you what they're trying to do there. In terms of what else do you need to know to get into a starter theme? Since this is the web, of course, you're going to need to know HTML. You need to know JavaScript to a certain extent. If you can't understand or can't interpret JavaScript, then a theme framework that uses jQuery might be more helpful, because jQuery is a little bit more concise. It's not as lengthy as JavaScript. They use a lot of wrapper functions to be able to do things that are a little more intelligible when you look at the function calls. And then, of course, you're going to need to know PHP as well. And again, depending on the starter theme, you're going to need to look at what PHP version. WordPress is currently, I think the minimum is 5.5 or 5.6, but there is PHP 7 out there, and so there are some themes that are being built on 7 as well.
Nice. And you mentioned PHP. I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's also something you touched on in both sessions 2 and 3. How much PHP do you need to know to begin using it with WordPress?
To begin using WordPress, it just as a content editor, you don't need to know PHP. Well, but if you're going to start theme development, plugin development, modifying themes, plugins, then you're going to need to start learning some PHP. And so start with the basics. I recommend going to W3 schools and look at their PHP tutorials and learn some of the basic stuff, some of the logic functions, the if then else, how for loops work, how to use variables in PHP, and then just start trying to go through things on, the best way I found the code is to start writing something. Don't look for a hello world, because to be able to get hello world to print, almost anyone can do it following a tutorial, but try to find a tutorial where you're trying to actually build something you're going to use in your site, and then start walking through the tutorials, walking through the code samples, and try to figure things out as you're walking through. See how functions work, see how this works, see how that works, and then eventually you'll get comfortable enough to the point where you feel like you can write your own code, and you start writing your own functions and writing your own things.
That's great advice. Joe, switching topics here back to multi-site, which is what you began session 3 with.
Yeah.
Is there a number of sites that would be too much for WordPress multi-site? And can you elaborate on what you might have to change to grow WordPress multi-site without performance problems?
Well, I personally have not heard of any limitations with WordPress multi-site. And keep in mind, WordPress.com is basically one large WordPress multi-site install. I have heard that as the subsites grow, as your database grows, then one key constraint is possibly splitting your database amongst multiple databases, because you will run into limitations with MySQL or whatever database engine is hosting your database. The other thing that I've also done on the front end is I run 2 web server front ends behind a load balancer for the college. And so I actually have 2 servers that have, I think, 4 gig of RAM each and 2 CPUs to support the install. And we're actually looking at upgrading those in the near future because of all the traffic we've been getting, especially since we all been in lockdown these last few months. So really if you're hosting it with a hosting company, you probably want to go with a dedicated server if you're going to do multi-site, especially if it's going to be a large multi-site and it's going to be a lot of content within those multi-sites, as well as the number of visits that you're getting to the site. With any site, really, you need to look at the traffic that you have on the site, and then also your site content, which is why I recommended in session 1 not to host audio and video on your site. Actually use third-party hosts like YouTube or Vimeo or some other hosting company to actually provide those larger asset files, so your web server doesn't become overwhelmed with all the traffic, plus trying to serve those large files.
Thanks, Joe. Joe, you are not only a website guy, but a server guy too. So I know you have a genuine appreciation for the value of backups. And you touched on that in session 3. But can you tell us how and maybe how often you test your backups to make sure that they're going to be there for you if you need them?
Well, I wish I could say that I test them all the time, but honestly, I'm a team of 1 at my full-time job. So just trying to keep up with everything else that I've got going on. I don't have to have time to test the backups, but I do regularly use the backups to pull specific sites down from our multi-site environment to use them in my development area. We also have a dev and test instance of our site that's also hosted with Amazon. And so it's not as regular as I'd want it to be, but on occasion we do pull backups from production, pull them over in the dev and test, restore them. And so far we've always been able to restore a site, been able to make sure that those are working. But as for regular testing, I wish I could say I tested it more often, but it's just what it is.
Okay. Do you have any advice for how people with more ordinary sites who are making backups, how they can test those backups to make sure that they're good?
Definitely save them to your local machine and pull them into your local sandbox, local dev environment. Make sure that you can restore them to that. One thing you can also do is when you're initially launching your site, build it locally and then back it up and send the backup up to production to restore. That's a good way to test that you can restore at production or you can restore it locally.
All right, I think we have time for maybe one more question. Joe, what is your opinion of using a child theme for custom CSS versus adding custom CSS to the customizer? Does one approach have an advantage over the other?
Um, in my opinion, not really, because it's one or the same. I like, in terms of going to the customizer, because as I said, I run two web front ends at the college. So if I add it to the customizer, it's added in one place. If I add it to a child theme, I have to add it to both servers. So I have to add it into my theme, send it into to source repository control at GitHub, then go in and update and make sure it pushes into both servers. So the customizer makes it a lot easier because you don't have to touch the file system. But if you're more concerned with making sure that those CSS changes stay with the site, stay with the theme that you're working with, then I would recommend putting them in the theme.
Okay, thank you, Joe, and thank you for your tremendous effort on this three-part series for WordCamp Kent 2020.
You're welcome.
For those of you who have been with us on this, if you have any feedback to offer us on this session or any of the previous sessions, we'd love to know what you think. Please go to the WordCamp Kent website and choose feedback from the menu to let us know your ideas and what your experience was like. So that concludes our 3-session series on WordPress 101. And we have one more session to go, I think, before 2 more sessions to go before closing remarks. We hope you'll stay with us for those remaining sessions.